Looking at the active construction of the building next to the Abyssal Guild, Han Yu-jin, thinking about how to make some money, promised, "Yes, this is also an important investment." Sitting on the windowsill, looking out the window, he said, "If the number of dungeons increases, as the system said, it's only a matter of time before this building collapses, even if I become its owner." He opened his phone and bought something online. "So I have to help Miss Seo Ka-young make progress in her research, and spread out my investment instead of just relying on the building." Clicking the button. "Buy with cash," Han Yu-jin thought. "I'll spend the last of my money on stocks, a company that will successfully develop a cure for hair loss in a few months." As Han Yu-jin thought about how best to invest his money to make it grow, he added, "However, these stocks will fall later, but that will be in the future." After deciding where he would spend the money, Han Yu-jin also remembered why he was doing all this in the first place, and thought, "And the most important thing is to collect S-classes." After finishing his thoughts on investment, later that day Han Yu-jin and his brother went to the port where the precious cargo was being unloaded. Standing on the port bridge, the boys heard sudden shouting somewhere near them. Turning their attention to the direction they were coming from, they saw Aram shouting and waving her hand. "Ah, Ozzy, we're here!" When Han Yu-jin saw Aram coming toward them, he was surprised to hear her say, "Aram, you're here. I thought you were going somewhere. Did you come back with the others?" She replied, "Yes, I spent time with my sisters." As Moon Hyun-ah approached the boys, she said to Han Yu-jin, "I gave her some advice as a hunter to my favorite younger sister." And then Aram immediately added, while searching for something on her phone, "I got a lot of recommendations for good restaurants." Looking at the ship at sea, Moon Hyun-ah said thoughtfully, "Did they get here okay? Are they 3 monsters?" Han Yu-hyun answered her, "They are still being unloaded. The ship just arrived." While everyone was going about their business, Moon Hyun-ah approached Han Yu-jin and whispered in his ear, "Hyun-nim, are you okay? Did something happen?" Hearing this question, Yu-jin just purred in surprise. Hearing this stammering, Yu-jin replied in confusion, "Yes, well, a lot of things happened. But it's not a big deal. Everything is great." And he thought in confusion, kidnapping, blackmail, murder, sneaking into dungeons, sneaking out of dungeons, almost losing an arm. Hearing this answer from Yu-jin, the girl said to him, "I don't know what's wrong, but you look a little distant. But you're okay, Hyung-nim?" Grabbing Han Yu-jin and holding him tightly in her arms, Moon Hyun-ah said to Han Yu-jin, "Could you give me one of the 3 monsters that came on this ship?" Han Yu-jin, in the midst of bliss, said in embarrassment, "Huh? Isn't that a bit much?" Hearing this response, the girl said to Han Yu-jin, "The upper class will still go to Hyun-nim. Lend him to me sometimes, okay? It will be beneficial for both of us." Hearing this proposal, Han Yu-jin thought, "Yu-jin's patience. She has great influence." Then he said, "Oh, lightweight, you are our favorite customer, but not for free." As Han Yu-jin was trying to pull away from this strong woman's embrace, he felt someone grab his arm and said, "Han Yu-jin-nim." When he turned around, he saw Seo-yun with angelic eyes, and he said in confusion, "Ah, Miss Seo-yun?" Seeing that Yu-jin was paying attention to her, she asked, "There's still room for me, right? You'll still be raising my baby even if you have 3 new ones, right?" To which Yu-jin replied, "Yes, of course." Pulling it out of each other's hands, the 2 girls were trying not to miss their chance to get a monster that Yu-jin would raise. In this difficult situation, Yu-jin thought, "F-class is dying here. These people are too strong." Looking at Han Yu-jin being fought over by the girls, Park Aram thought, "A juicy. He looks like a slime monster." Meanwhile, Yu-jin was completely exhausted and felt like something incomprehensible. In a state of shock, Yu-jin thought, "I'm already squeezed like a lemon. Can I handle 50 or more S-classes?" But suddenly he heard his brother calling out to him. Breaking free from the girl's grasp, Yu-jin crawled over to Yu-hyun and said, "Eh? What is it, Yu-hyun?" He replied by handing him a gift. "Here, take this." Putting the pendant in Yu-jin's hand, Han Yu-hyun spoke to him, explaining its purpose. "This is a translating item. Once the cultivation facility opens, people will start coming from abroad." After saying this and handing over such an important item to his elder brother for his future work, he added, "So, I thought you might need it." After handing the gift to his brother, Yu Heng spoke to him in a shy tone. "From now on, I won't stop you, even if I'm worried. Tell me every time you need help with something. Don't overdo it." Hearing these words from his younger brother, Han Yu-jin continued, "You are the most important thing to me, more than anything else." Then Yu-jin said joyfully, "My brother. He's become a completely different person." Hearing this conversation between the boys, the girls behind them felt sick to their stomachs at the calf-like tenderness, and Yu-jin thought, "Yes, people change so much when problems are solved with words. Come on, let's do it. I can do it." While thinking about this, Han Yu-jin heard from the movers. "The monster cages have been unloaded." After receiving this information, he thanked them and added, "All right, we're coming." Holding the gift from his younger brother in his hands, Han Yu-jin thought happily as he was about to go to the monster cages. "I can't leave mine to the mercy of fate." After thinking about this, they headed for the container. When they arrived, it immediately opened, and they could go inside to pick up the cargo that had arrived. Opening the container's door, Han Yu-jin saw 2 staggered boxes inside and thought, "I will make sure that my brother and I can live a good life together." As soon as the door of the container was opened, the eyes of one of the cages lit up, and the remains of bones that were left after they had been fed became visible. After finally delivering this important cargo, one of the loaders who was responsible for it spoke to Han Yu-jin, sighing heavily and adjusting his cap. "Here, your master's marks." As he handed Han Yu-jin the master's marks, the porter added, "You'll have a hard time growing them." And there were shouts near the container. "Watch out! Lower it!" As he handed Han Yu-jin all the materials he would need when he received the delivery, the loader said with a heavy sigh, "It was a complete disaster. On the way here, This was followed by the screams of one of the workers. Hearing these cries, all the workers looked inside, where all they could hear was a strong wind that scattered everyone. And then the workers said in surprise, "What is this?" "Oh, one of the monsters got out." After these surprised exclamations, the griffin that had just escaped from its cage began to fly in the air, screaming loudly around. Noticing this noise and the puff of air and dust that rose, Han Yu-jin, shielding himself from the blinding sun, along with his brother and Seo Yan, said in surprise, "A griffin!" Seeing who had escaped from the cage, Han Yu-jin remembered the description of this ancient mythical beast, an animal from legends. It has the body of a lion and the head and wings of an eagle. Recalling the description and the structure of this monster that had once again escaped from its cage, Yu-jin thought, a monster that has appeared since the dungeons were opened. Looking at the monster that escaped from the cage, Moon Hyun-ah said, "There probably aren't any other monsters that can handle it, if I can ride it." To which Seo Yoon replied, "The dragon is still better." Meanwhile, Park Aram expressed her opinion. "He's so cute. Look at his beige wings." Meanwhile, Han Yu-jin used his skill while holding his master's crystals in his hands. The title of Perfect Caretaker adds effect to the master's mark. After using his perfect tutor skill, Han Yu-jin noticed that the griffin was interested in him and began to approach him at a rapid speed. Seeing that the monster was approaching him, Han Yu-jin covered himself with his hands and screamed in fright to try to prevent a collision with the monster. Noticing that his brother was in danger, Han Yu-hyun grabbed his brother and pulled him sharply toward him to save him from the monster, blocking his arm from the monster and shouting, "Look out, Hyun!" As he jerked his brother away, something snapped in his neck, and Jin passed out. Noticing that he was unconscious, Han Yu-hyun began shaking him and calling out, "Hyun, are you okay?" Seo Yan also ran over to hear these cries, and Park Aram noticed that something had happened to Jin. While everyone was worried about Han Yu-jin, they forgot about the griffin, who was still lying on the ground after being hit by Han Yu-hyun to protect his brother. The next moment, when the porters were transporting another load of potions, the griffin suddenly became angry and decided to attack them. Rising to its feet, the monster immediately rushed at the porters to get what they were moving. Hearing the screams behind her, Aram noticed what was happening and exclaimed in fright, "Oh no." Standing not far from the monster, Moon Hyun-ah shouted at the monster using her air barrier skill, "You're not going anywhere from here!" And after that, a gale of wind suddenly broke out around the griffin, slowly trapping it in the air cage. But for this monster, this air barrier was not a threat. He could easily break through it. When Moon Hyun-ah saw him fly out of the cage, she said in confusion, "He escaped?" Pointing to the griffin, Moon Hyun-ah shouted to Park Aram, who followed him, "It must have wind resistance even though it's still a baby." Hearing this, Aram exclaimed, "I'll catch him!" Park Aram caught up with the monster and tried to catch it in midair. And when she had almost caught it, she exclaimed, "Come here, you little pest!" After dropping the monster right in front of her, Park Aram heard Moon Hyun-ah say, "What are you doing, S-Class?" To which she replied, "What am I supposed to do with its wings? I've never even caught a pigeon in my life." Having said that, Park Aram offered her own solution to catch the monster. "How about we just freeze it?" To which Moon Hyun replied, "No, you want to kill it?" Then Seo Yan ran to their aid, exclaiming, "Use this! This cloth is made from a byproduct of the dungeon." Hearing this, Park Aram called out to her, "Oh, that's great, Seo Yunani!" As soon as Park Aram got the cloth from the byproduct, it didn't take long to catch the griffin, and within a minute, it was done. After catching the monster, she wrapped it in the cloth, immobilizing it so that it would not harm anyone else. Holding the monster in their hands, the 3 girls, tired of all this chase after the monster, said, finally, looking at the little griffin, Moon Hyun-ah said tiredly to her friend who was holding it, "It would be much easier if we hunted it." Hearing these words from the head of the Destroyers Guild, Kang So-yeon, holding the immobilized monster in her arms and watching what it did while being caught, said, "I'm no longer sure that." Having said that, she continued, drawing the others' attention to the broken car and the many provisions for transportation. "It is possible to tame such a monster." Recalling the early days of the dungeons, Yu Heng said, "Dangerous creatures that killed people and were killed in return after the dungeons were opened. Suppress their aggressive behavior and accept them as comrades. It sounds like a dream." After saying this, Han Yu-hyun spoke to his elder brother. "He has already attacked you. Maybe you should kill him." Hearing this from his younger brother, Han Yu-jin said angrily, "Who are you going to kill?" Slowly rising, Han Yu-jin sat down abruptly, groaning in pain. Hearing this, Han Yu-hyun shouted out in alarm, "Hyun!" And somewhere nearby, someone else's anxious voice also sounded, "Mr. Yu-jin!" Overcoming his pain, Han Yu-jin stood up and raised his head, speaking confidently. He had no evil intentions. He didn't care that my bone was almost broken. Han Yu-jin looked at the child and considered his characteristics. Before this, he may have only seen high-class hunters. After examining the characteristics, he saw Golden Griffin, Cub. Current characteristic class is C. Potential with growth is AS. Looking it up and down, Yu-jin saw growth requirements. Consume a certain amount of magic horse meat. And then Jin said, he simply doesn't know how to control his power against low-class hunters and those who have not awakened. After saying this, Han Yu-jin suddenly spoke, "Miss Seo-yoon, can you let go of the griffin for a moment? Yu-hyun, stay where you are." Hearing this, Yu-hyun exclaimed in alarm, "What are you going to do?" And then Seo-yoon spoke up. Will you be okay?" Hearing such words of concern and worry for his health, Han Yu-jin responded to them, "Don't worry about me, I'll just teach him to coexist with us." After saying this, Han Yu-jin pointed to himself, and very confidently, as if it were a real honor, he said joyfully, "After all, I am the weakest among all of us here." Holding onto his crippled arm, Han Yu-jin approached the girl with the griffin and slowly walked toward them, saying in a tired voice, "Aren't you a glorious little man?" Han Yu-jin held out his hand in front of him and called the monster over to him, speaking happily to it so as not to scare it away. "Come here." Hearing that he was being called, the little griffin stuck out its claws and joyfully ran toward Han Yu-jin, unrestrained by its strength and running at full speed. But the next moment, as it approached Han Yu-jin, it clawed at his arm with all its might, causing him quite a bit of damage. But in addition to his injured arm, his speed also threw Jin away from him, and he flew further away, still fantasizing, and loudly exclaimed, "Ooh, it hurts so much, I'm bleeding." After putting on such a show, Han Yu-jin, holding his injured arm, said joyfully through the pain, "Haha, you got it, little griffin, I'm weak." When the griffin saw this, he was seriously frightened. Spilling healing potions on his hand to heal his crippled body from his failed attempt, Han Yu-jin beckoned to the animal with his finger. "Come, let's try again." In an attempt to teach the griffin to be gentle and to control its strength, Han Yu-jin created a bloody show that left the girls in shock and unable to speak. While training the griffin, Han Yu-jin was heard shouting, "Gently, go even gentler. Feel what real weakness is." This was repeated over and over again until he learned. Looking at his brother, who did not spare his body but endured all the pain he caused to achieve his goal, Yu Heng said proudly, "Hyun." And the girls, looking at him in surprise, thought only one thing. Is he proud of this? After a few failed attempts and a few bottles of healing potion used up, the griffin managed to land gently on Han Yu-jin's hand. And then he said happily, "Yes, that's the way to do it. Good job." After several unsuccessful attempts, Han Yu-jin was able to train the griffin to gently sit on his owner's hand. And now, after the second successful attempt, Han Yu-jin spoke to his monster while cuddling with it. "You're a fast learner. You're so smart." Seeing how cute the griffin looked with Han Yu-jin, Seo-yeon spoke in her native language, saying, "Cute." Holding the monster on his arm, Han Yu-jin spoke to Park Aram. "Here, Aram, do you want to hold it for a while? Cover its eyes." Hearing this suggestion, the girl said nervously, I... Taking him in her arms and closing his eyes, she added, "Will he be okay? What if he runs away again?" Hearing this, Han Yu-jin said, "If we close his eyes and move him to another place, he will be fine." After saying this, Han Yu-jin walked toward the container and said to the rest of his comrades, "The reason why the griffin has become agitated is right here." After opening the cage a little better, Han Yu-jin showed 2 more animals that had been brought to him for training, and Han Yu-jin said, "These are shadow unicorns." When Moon Hyun-ah saw the unicorns in the container, she was surprised. There were 2 more in the cage all along, to which Jin added, "Yes, he was probably so excited because he was in the same space with them." Recalling what was written in the description of the griffin and what were the basic requirements for the growth of this magical beast, Han Yu-jin said, The main source of food for griffins is magical horses like unicorns. Hearing Han Yu-jin's requirements, Moon Hyun said, "Magic horse meat? There are plenty of them in our guild's dungeon. We can share it, as payment for letting me ride." Hearing the terms of the deal, Han Yu-jin spoke to her. "Deal," watching Han Yu-jin easily make contact with the magical animals. Kang So-yeon said with a heavy heart, "That's great, Oni." And then Moon Hyun added, "Don't tell me. It's incredible." Looking at the boy entering the shadow unicorn's cage and talking to them so sweetly, Moon Hyun added, "Being an F class." And then Yu-jin said to the animals, "Were you scared? It's okay now." After entering the cage, the animals immediately calmed down, and Han Yu-jin saw that he had received a system notification. The title of Ideal Caregiver adds effect to the owner's mark. The object is expressing interest in the caregiver. Seeing how Han Yu-jin had easily found a way to communicate with them, even after such a stressful situation for the unicorns, Moon Hyun said, "He can easily do things that no one else can do." After taming the shadow unicorns and seeing that they came to him and were not afraid at all, Yu-jin said happily, "Good, good." As Moon Hyun-ah got to her feet and watched Han Yu-jin, she thought confidently, "Abyssal Head's big brother?" "No, Hunter Han Yu-jin." As she watched him tell the others how to approach each of the monsters so that they wouldn't be frightened, Moon Hyun added, "I think I can trust him a little more." While playing with one of the unicorns, Han Yu-jin gave orders. "For now, send the unicorns to the training center. And yes, we need to name them." After saying that the unicorns needed to be named, Han Yu-jin added, "How about we just call them White and Black?" Hearing this suggestion, Park Arim exclaimed in displeasure, "Ugh, what kind of stupid names are these, Ajusi? It sucks." Han Yu-hyun added, "They're great names, Hyun." Hearing Han Yu-jin's strange names for the unicorns and Han Yu-hyun's agreement, Park Arim said in disappointment, "It seems that creativity in naming is not his strong suit." Meanwhile, a terrible massacre took place somewhere in a guild building, killing almost all of the guild members. There was only one member left, who was also on the verge of death. As he was gasping for breath because a powerful huntress grabbed him by the neck and held him in the air, he heard her ask him a question. "You really don't know? Bricks bought out my contract." Looking around at the dead people, she added, "I put a high-level curse on it that blinds those who break it. But someone just broke the contract as if it meant nothing. Of course, this would bother me. I just started my business." Choking in the arms of the girl who told him about the destroyed contract, the hostage, holding onto her hand to get some air, spoke with difficulty. I don't know, really." After saying this, the hostage, looking at the shadowed image of his killer, said, "How do I know who signed the contract and destroyed it? The head of the guild was killed in the kidnapping incident." Hearing this news that the guild leader had been killed in the incident, the high-level huntress said slyly, Is that so?" Hearing this sly voice from the girl, guild member Bricks, who had already hoped that he had provided her with valuable information, spoke to her. "Let go." But she just squeezed his neck in her hands and finished him off. Having finished the last of the guild members, the girl said in disappointment, "What a pity. If you don't know, there's no reason to keep you alive." Finding Han Yu-jin's photo, the high-class huntress said thoughtfully, "The one who bought the contract is dead, and no one in the Kidnappers Guild knows anything about it." Lifting Han Yu-jin's photo to her eye level and holding it in her fingernails, she said ominously, "I guess I'll have to ask the kidnapped personally then." Meanwhile, after several attempts by Han Yu-jin to come up with names for the unicorns, one of them was named White. And the animals, of course, quickly got used to the new unfamiliar environment. Hearing several options from Han Yu-jin about what to name the unicorns, she was very angry, and that's why the unicorns' names changed a little. The girl said to Yu-jin menacingly, "Change the names to White and Black," to which Yu-jin replied in surprise, "What's the difference?" At the same time, the griffin was named Blue. It was given to him because of the color of his eyes, the same griffin that caused a stir on the very first day of its arrival in Korea. And after a while, when Han Yu-jin was training them, it was time for lunch. But even here, it was not without incident. Han Yu-jin could be heard shouting from the room, "Blue, I told you not to spread your wings at the dinner table." Seeing that Blue had been mischievous again and had thrown all the food on the floor, Han Yu-jin began to clean up the mess and said in frustration, I have to clean the floor again. And I just finished a while ago, and the shower hose is broken." When Blue realized what he had done, he began to look around happily, smiling playfully. But as soon as he turned his head to the right, he noticed Mir, who was in a very bad mood. Seeing Mir's fearsome expression, Blue started to help Han Yu-jin clean up in fright. Han Yu-jin said in frustration, "I think he's only behaving a little better because of Mir." Thinking back to the first day that Blue came to Han Yu-jin's house, Peace showed him his dominance in the house on the very first day by throwing him a griffin toward the exit. Seeing this, Han Yu-heng said calmly, "So we found out who's stronger." When Han Yujin finished cleaning up after the afternoon's pogrom, he noticed that all three animals were already sleeping peacefully in their respective places. Peace was sleeping next to Squeaky's nest, curled up in a ball. Squeaky was sleeping in his nest made of twigs, which was hung from a tree branch, and the griffin was sleeping a little further away from them because he needed more space to sleep. Seeing that all three of them were already sleeping quietly, Han Yujin, who had finally been able to feed them and calm them down, breathed a sigh of relief as he wiped the sweat from his forehead. After putting all of his children to bed, Han Yujin, being completely exhausted, walked on his weak legs to his room, saying wearily, "Raising children is so hard," falling down on his bed, which he could barely reach. Han Yujin, squeezed like a lemon, said in a tired voice, "I'm almost dying. How am I going to raise 50 yet?" Han Yujin laid down on his bed and buried his nose in his blanket and said wearily, "Come on, let's see how many I have." While counting them in his mind, Han Yujin said, "Peace and Squeaky, blue and white and black at the training center." Just as he said this, he heard an alert. A poison dragon has been detected, and Dio Valshedis is cursed. Hearing this announcement, Han Yujin suddenly opened his eyes in fright at the suddenness of the announcement. His fatigue and desire to sleep instantly disappeared after hearing this message. Han Yujin sat up and started looking around in fright, and grabbed his phone and noticed the following notifications. Rocketus Predator skill activated. Collision with Dio Valshedis will double the skill's effects. Unlocking his phone and watching to see if there was anything on the news, Han Yujin said in surprise, "A poison and cursed dragon? A dungeon has appeared nearby?" There are no reports of it. As soon as he said this, the same girl appeared from the portal in front of him and grabbed the phone in his hands. Seeing that hand, Yujin froze in place. The next moment, he looked up to see who it was that had grabbed his phone, appearing out of nowhere in his room. Taking the phone out of Han Yujin's frightened hands, the girl walked away from him and said, "C'est genial!" Looking at Han Yujin's phone, the girl said to him in an ominous voice, "Comment Master Remarque? How did you notice me in French? Tu as l'air de cacher un pouvoir spécial." Turning to face Han Yujin, the girl spoke to him. "Je suis..." Oh, my translator necklace wasn't activated. Je suis means I in French. Hearing such strange words from the girl, Han Yujin was frightened. What? A foreigner? How did she get here? Looking at the girl again, who picked up the necklace that translated her speech, Han Yujin suddenly had a thought. Is this the dragon of poison and curse? But she looks just like a human. Looking at the girl's characteristics, he could only see that her characteristic class was S. Looking at Han Yujin, the girl spoke while holding a necklace. "It's a beautiful night, isn't it, sweetie?" Seeing her characteristics, Han Yujin was frightened in his head when he saw her class. A natural S class, like Yu Hyun and Song Hyun Jae? After reading through all the information available about her that his promising sprout skill had provided, Han Yujin said in confusion, "But I haven't heard anything about her in the future." Moving almost close to Han Yujin's face, the girl looked him directly in the eye and said in a sinister voice, "What are you reading so carefully?" After saying this, she grabbed Han Yujin's head and pushed him against the bed to stop what he was doing. Han Yujin opened his eyes and looked at Rieta, who had burst into his room and said in fright, "Im?" To which she replied, interrupting his moaning, "Your eyes were moving from left to right as if you were reading something." Looking into the girl's eyes, she said to Han Yujin in an ominous voice, "Are you reading some information about me?" Hearing these words, Han Yujin was confused. She understands. Recalling the same situation with Song Hyun, Han Yujin suddenly remembered. The same thing happened to the head of the Jupiter Guild. It seems that S classes instantly notice things like that, and she was able to sneak through the security system with ease. Grabbing the hand of the door that was holding his face, preventing him from standing up, Han Yujin thought, "If I do something rash, then..." Breathing heavily and swallowing hard, as if there was a lump stuck in his throat, Han Yujin realized that joking around with this girl was no good, and continued his thought. "I'm going to die." And then, after he calmed down, Han Yujin spoke to the girl who had entered his room. "If you have some business with me, you should have talked about it in the daylight." After saying this and trying to remove the girl's hand from his face to finally stand up, Han Yujin somehow managed to shout out to her, "Rieta!" Finally letting go of the frightened boy, the girl spoke to him in a hurt voice, sitting down next to him on the bed. "I was disturbed by the guilds you made agreements with." As she said this, Han Yujin also heard her continue. "Besides, your brother clearly warned everyone." Hearing the girl say this, Han Yujin was confused. Just as I expected from him, the girl approached Han Yujin again and placed her index fingernail on his forehead and spoke to the frightened young man. "That's why I decided to sneak in here." After saying this, she leaned over to Han Yujin and spoke in a surprised voice, pressing her fingernail on his forehead. "Find out the answers to all my questions and then leave." As she said this, Rieta moved closer to Han Yujin again, causing him to move away from her. And then she said thoughtfully, "But you don't look like an ordinary F class." Hearing these words and moving away from the girl, Han Yujin almost fell off the bed, pulling away from Rieta and exclaimed in fright, "Kaya!" Seeing that the girl was pulling at him again with her long, clawed hand, Han Yujin was scared to death and thought in frustration, "This is how I'm going to die. I was just beginning to think that life was going well." As Han Yujin began to think this, he closed his eyes and no longer saw the actions that Rieta was performing. As she extended her finger to him again, she said in confusion, "Why doesn't it work? Don't you feel anything?" Han Yujin opened his eyes when he heard the girl speak to him, and when he saw what was happening, he exclaimed in fright, "Ah! What are you doing?" The girl said in surprise, "It doesn't look like you have any items that resist poison or curses." After looking Han Jin up and down, Rieta said to Han Yujin in a sly tone, "Yeah, you must have the right skill for this." Staring at Han Yujin with the eyes of a predator, the girl who had climbed onto his bed said thoughtfully, "The one who canceled the contract was you, right?" Hearing this question from Rieta, Han Yujin asked in surprise, "Contract? What are you talking about?" The girl replied, "I recently started a contract business using my curse skill." Handing Han Yujin one of the examples of contracts she had drawn up, she said, "All of these contracts are illegal, unofficial, but quite useful, you know?" After telling him about her business and her underground work, she continued, "That contract blinds the one who destroys it." Han Yujin thought back to the battle with the guild leader who had kidnapped him. She's talking about that incident. Showing her contract to Han Yujin, Rieta said to Han Yujin, "I didn't think you would be the one to break it and break the curse." Hearing this, the young man said in confusion, "I don't know what you're talking about." After saying that he had no idea what he was talking about, Han Yujin added in a worried voice, "I'm just a fragile F-class." Hearing this, the girl said slyly, "Perhaps we can test it then." With that, she grabbed Han Yujin's hand and pulled him along. Realizing what was about to happen to him, Han Yujin exclaimed in fright, not understanding why this was happening to him. The next moment, the contract that Rieta had created was in Han Yujin's hands, and as the girl's hands began to stretch the paper to tear it, she said, "Let's try it. At worst, you'll only go blind. How about it?" Hearing the consequences of destroying the contract, Han Yujin, trying not to give himself away, exclaimed in fright, "Eh? What? Well, wait, what are you—" But the next moment the contract was already terminated. After the contract was cancelled, Han Yujin received 2 notifications. The destruction of the contract has activated the curse of blindness. Blindness curse has been deactivated by L-class curse resistance. Holding the broken contract in his hands, Han Yujin heard the girl say in a happy voice, "I knew it!" Han Yujin shouted back at her in anger, "Sane! Crazy!" Frightened, I looked at the girl, who had canceled the contract without a second's hesitation, and thought, is she completely crazy? What if I had no resistance to curses? Who is she anyway? What does she want from me? Looking at the girl, who was already smiling, Han Yujin thought, "She doesn't look like she wants to pay me back for the illegal contract." Then the girl said in a happy voice, "Don't worry, I won't hurt you." Sitting on his bed in shock, Han Yujin said to the girl in alarm, "What was that just now?" Rieta answered him with a sly smile, "I just wanted to find out what happened to the contract." After saying this, she approached the frightened Han Yujin and spoke to him. "I was just wondering if my curse skill was okay. It's the reward for killing the boss in the missing dungeon." Hearing some strange explanation for his actions, Han Yujin asked Rieta again, "The missing dungeon?" The girl replied, "If I tell you, nothing will change. No one would believe it anyway." Having said that, the girl explained to the boy what she was talking about, saying, "When I cleaned it up, it just went vo and disappeared." After saying this, she asked Han Yujin, "Do you believe me? Do you know anything about this?" He took a thoughtful pose and put his hand to his chin and answered thoughtfully, "A little." As Han Yujin thought about Rieta's words, he remembered what the system administrator had said. There will be times when dungeons from the future appear, but we will try to get rid of them as soon as possible. And then he said, maybe this is the system. This is a dungeon that was supposed to appear in 5 years. Recalling these words of the system administrator, Han Yujin was deep in thought about Rieta. I don't know of any S-class hunters in the future who would use curses or poison, so she's thinking about this development. Han Yujin continued his train of thought. So she has acquired a skill that no one else in the original future had. Because I turned back time. Thinking about where this skill could have come from, Han Yujin came to a conclusion. The reward for defeating the boss of the poison and curse dungeon. And that boss was... Recalling the notification before the girl's appearance, Yujin saw, encountering Dio Valshedis will improve skill effects by half. Realizing where the girl had gotten her skills from, Han Yujin spoke confidently. the dragon of poison and cursed Dio Valchetis. Hearing such accurate information about obtaining her skills, the girl spoke happily. That's right. How did you know that? Asking Han Yu-jin how he knew about her skill, Rieta said to Han Yu-jin, the SSS class title of Dio Valchetis twins. It can only be obtained by killing Dio Valchetis and his twin. After giving this information, the girl also added something else, telling Han Yu-jin and began to recall her family tree. My brother is an S-class hunter. Saying that her brother was also a high-class hunter, the girl added to her previous speech. That's why we both obtained dragon powers. Hearing this information, Han Yu-jin finally understood what had happened and why he had received the notification of the dragon of poisons and curses, seeing the girl as a part of that dragon. Looking Rieta up and down, Han Yu-jin said thoughtfully, half dragon, half human, someone who absorbed the power of a dragon and became its incarnation. After realizing what had happened to her, Han Yu-jin said thoughtfully, a very unusual incident that occurred due to the reversal of time. Not just her, but her brother as well. As she approached Han Yu-jin and looked at him almost intimately, the girl said inquisitively, it's strange that you know about all of this. Hearing this, Han Yu-jin only looked at her in confusion. As she crept up on Han Yu-jin, who was running away from her again, she said, this is such a strange feeling. Could you be some kind of dragon as well? Hearing this, Han Yu-jin replied in fright, I'm just an ordinary person. Grabbing Han Yu-jin's hand and lifting it up, Rieta said to him, really, that's the smell of a fellow. No. It's more like a predator that can easily defeat Dio Valchetis. Seeing the girl's strange actions, Han Yu-jin exclaimed in alarm, but wait, what are you doing? Seeing that the girl was sniffing him and smelling a strange odor from him, Han Yu-jin immediately thought, is it because of the Rauchita's predator skill? He really killed the poison dragon king, damn it! As Han Yu-jin watched the girl throw him down on the bed and climb on top of him, he thought in confusion. But she doesn't know about this. Climbing on top of Han Yu-jin, standing motionless above his body and watching his reaction, the girl said, how interesting. I'm not attracted to ordinary people anymore. Smiling lustfully and licking her lips over Han Yu-jin's body, she said, it's wonderful. I haven't had this much fun in a long time. Hearing these words, and being in such a strange situation with such an unexplainable development, Han Yu-jin, being in a passive situation, thought in confusion, what is she going to do? Crawling out from under the girl, Han Yu-jin stood up a little and looked directly into Rieta's eyes, and said to her in a worried voice, excuse me, Miss Rieta. Hearing herself addressed in such a strange way, she looked at the boy and replied, When Han Yu-jin saw that she was unbuttoning his top shirt and started running her fingers over his body, he was frightened. Wait a second, what are you doing? Hearing the boy's frightened voice, the girl spoke to him in a calm tone. Oh, relax. Let's get to know each other a little better. As she ran her hands over Han Yu-jin's body, Rieta spoke to him. So much time has passed since then. I felt my strength was similar to someone else's. Hearing this, Han Yu-jin exclaimed in confusion, no, you can't. Pointing to the girl's shoes, which had already reached the point of being comfortable, Han Yu-jin exclaimed in fright, you can't get into bed without taking off your shoes. Hearing Han Yu-jin's words, the girl got out of bed and said in frustration, oh my, you still shouldn't have rejected me so coldly. Hearing these words, Han Yu-jin was embarrassed. I don't think I'm in the wrong in this situation. After saying this, Han Yu-jin added to the girl in anxiety, why don't you now that you've already figured it out? Hearing Han Yu-jin say this, Rieta said, suddenly remembering something, oh, that's right. I wanted to ask you something else. After saying this, she immediately brightened up and spoke to Han Yu-jin with a joyful voice, announcing her request. Will you raise my baby? Hearing this request from Rieta, Han Yu-jin thought in disappointment. Really? Sitting in bed, disappointed that she had heard these rumors, he thought, Moon-hyun, why can't you keep your mouth shut? Standing in front of Jin, Rieta said happily, well, you know, there's a little beast cub that I want to entrust to you. Hearing Rieta say this, Han Yu-jin covered his face and said in a disappointed voice, you need to take a turn. The other guilds have already made deals with me. Hearing Han Yu-jin say this, Rieta put the knife blade to Han Yu-jin's throat and said, I know about this. Why else would I have decided to sneak out under the cover of night and ask for a favor? Seeing such a strong conviction from the girl, Han Yu-jin said to her, wow, you really know how to ask others for favors. And then, sitting on the bed and looking at the ceiling, he thought, and yet, I guess it's not so bad. Thinking of Rieta, whose cub he would be raising, Han Yu-jin pondered, a natural S-class with the rank of SSS class. It's too dangerous to let her in, even if she doesn't end up joining a guild. While thinking about it, Han Yu-jin also had another thought. Even if something suddenly happens, this kind of connection will definitely serve me well. Imagining the deal with the monster transfer. Please take care of my baby. Of course, thinking about this development, Han Yujin thought, in that case, Rieta will be in my debt. Having made this decision, Han Yujin said to the girl, very well, but I have one condition. After finishing the conversation with the girl, she left, and in a very short time, morning came, and then Ki Seong-han entered his room, saying happily, good morning, Yujin. I bought you some ginseng tonic to increase your stamina. As Kim Seong-han walked a little further into Han Yujin's room, he saw the boy lying on the floor, and things scattered all over the room, and he called out to him in fright. What happened here? Dropping the bags of drinks and food, Kim Seong-han rushed to Han Yujin. Running up to his master, he said anxiously, what happened last night? Han Bijin answered him in a tired voice, many things. Reaching for his phone, Han Yujin spoke to Kim Seong-han. I am completely exhausted. He thought back to the night before, reflecting. In the end, I agreed to her request, and we agreed to exchange messages in secret. Private messages. A message on her phone from Rieta. Thank you very much, my cupcake. Sleep with the angels. Seeing this, Han Yujin thought, it seems that the translator necklace has no effect on the message. As Han Yujin continued to recall what had happened last night, he became exhausted, irritated, and tired, and thought, that woman did whatever she wanted until she left. And before she left my room, she said, thank you. Kisses. Drinking the juice that Kim Seong-han brought him, Han Yujin drank it from the guard's hands because he was unable to hold the package himself, and continued his thoughts. Fortunately, nothing happened. She could have easily killed me. Han Yujin continued his reflections as he washed his face in the morning, also with the help of Kim Seong-han. It could have been much worse. I don't even want to imagine what would have happened if all my friends were here. Lying on the couch, waiting for Kim Seong-han to prepare breakfast, Yujin continued his uninterrupted train of thought. Meng Wu-bu was at the forge, and Yu-hyun couldn't have protected me, and withstood the poison and the S-class curse at the same time. Lying on the couch, completely exhausted, Han Yujin thought about another development. Perhaps I should have used a code word on her. Thinking back to Rieta, Han Yujin thought, if the skill's effect is doubled against poison and cursed dragons, it would have an effect. If I were to say, I love you, just once, but starting to shake his head to get those stupid thoughts out of his head, Han Yujin continued, no, she's too unpredictable. There's no telling what will happen if she becomes as clingy as the others. Noticing that his master was shaking his head, Kim Seong-han walked over to him and asked in concern, Han Yujin, are you okay? Hearing these words from his bodyguard, he answered sharply, oh yes, I'm fine. I was just thinking for a while. When Han Yujin came to, he noticed how clean and fresh his room was, and he was amazed. Wow, when did you have time to clean up like this? Hearing this question, Kim Seong-han replied in confusion, I just cleaned up a little bit. Taking Han Yujin's hand in his own, Kim Seong-han spoke joyfully to his master. You did a wonderful job taking care of the animals, didn't you? Removing the handkerchief from his head, which was used to keep his hair from getting into the food during cooking, Kim Seong-han added to Han Yujin, saying, call me whenever you are tired. After saying this, Kim Seong-han also added, touching Han Yujin with his last sentence, I will come to your aid immediately. Hearing this, Han Yujin replied in a tearful voice, barely able to hold back his tears. Seong-han. Hearing these words, Han Yujin cried out to Kim Seong-han, I love you. You are so incredible. You are my grandson. To which Seong-han replied, Kia ha ha, Grandpa Usu. And then Yujin thought, that's right. I'll raise the people around me to the maximum first. While hugging Kim Seong-han and telling him how much he loved him, Han Yujin suddenly saw a system notification. Kim Seong-han has met the minimum prerequisites for the next grade. Seeing this system notification, Han Yujin suddenly grabbed Kim Seong-han by the voice and pulled him toward him, exclaiming in surprise, eh? Seeing this strange reaction, Seong-han asked him in surprise, B. Yujin? Looking at Kim Seong-han's characteristics, Han Yujin noticed in his characteristics, the conditions for raising the level of the target to S-class have been met. S stands for checking the conditions for raising the level. As soon as Han Yujin noticed this change in Kim Seong-han, he immediately rushed to his brother's office to tell him. When Yu-hyun arrived at the office and told him everything, he was surprised. You can raise Kim Seong-han's level? When Han Yu-hyun heard this news, he was astonished. Is that even possible? Han Yujin replied, that is why I came to you as quickly as I could. After saying this, Yujin said, but the requirements are a bit tricky. The requirements for raising Kim Seong-han's level. Complete one of the requirements. Defeat an A-class dungeon boss in one hit. Defeat an S-class beast alone. Defeat an SS-class beast with a team of less than 10 people. After hearing all the possible options that Kim Sung-han could follow to level up, Han Yu-hyun said, "It seems that the last option is the best of the three, but SS-class beasts are only found in dungeons outside of Korea." Hearing what his younger brother had just told him, Han Yu-jin partially denied his statement, but added happily, "Actually, no. The first option is also quite good." Thinking about what they could do to raise their friend's level, Han Yu-hyun said thoughtfully, "An A-grade dungeon? Kim Sung-han has an attacking skill of the same level." After saying this, Han Yu-hyun also added, "But it won't be enough to defeat the boss in one hit." Hearing such embarrassing words from his younger brother, Han Yu-jin pointed to himself and said happily, "I can help with this." Hearing that Han Yu-jin could help Kim Sung-han become an S-class, Han Yu-hyun was surprised to hear that. "You? How?" Han Yu-jin answered him, beginning his story about the plan to make Kim Sung-han an SF class. The first point was to equip Kim Sung-han with the best equipment they had, and so he announced the first point of his plan. Equip Kim Sung-han with anything that can increase the strength of the attack. To fulfill the next point of the mission, Han Yu-jin already needed Park Aram and her abilities. Remembering the second point, he said, Park Aram will give him a boost with the Day Without Shadow enhancement. After talking about the two main points of his plan, Han Yu-jin finally moved on to the third and final point. "And I will double his attack with my skill." After hearing all the key points and the progress of the plan that Han Yu-jin had come up with and demonstrated on the puppets, Yu-hyun, hearing about his older brother's presence in the plan, suddenly asked in surprise, "Wait a minute, why are you also participating in this plan?" Hearing such surprise in his brother's voice, Han Yu-jin spoke to him in an offended tone. "Of course, I also need to go." Hearing his brother's words, Han Yu-hyun said to him in alarm, "Hen, have you gone mad?" Hearing his brother say this, Han Yu-jin looked at his younger brother and said in a confused tone, "Actually, I mean it." Hearing these words from his elder, Yu-hyun replied, "What would you say if I were an F grade and went to an A-grade dungeon?" After saying this, Han Yu-heng also added, "Yu-heng, you want to drive me crazy?" Before he could finish, Han Yu-jin answered him in embarrassment. But I have a B-grade shield." Holding up one of the dolls Han Yu-jin had used to explain his plan, Han Yu-hyun sighed heavily and said to his brother, "You know very well that he won't help you. We're talking about killing the boss." After saying this, Han Yu-hyun revealed the main problem that he had not thought through when he said it. "You said that you can only share the effect of a skill when you touch another person. So you have to touch Kim Sung-han at the moment when he deals the boss a fatal blow." After describing the moment that will be present, Han Yu-jin also added, "The blast wave from such an attack will simply blow your F-class body into dust, and the shield will not work in this case because you will be touching it." Hearing such nuances from Han Yu-jin, which they would definitely encounter in the dungeon, Han Yu-jin just started laughing at his words. After some time of sinister laughter, Han Yu-jin took out a bracelet from his pocket and showed it to his brother. As he showed it to Han Yu-hyun, Yu-jin said slyly, "Do you remember that night when the four of us had dinner? I asked Yu Meng to do something for me. This is it, out of the oven." Looking at the bracelet that Yu-jin was pointing at him, Han Yu-hyun said in surprise, "What is this? An ordinary shield isn't—" After saying this, Han Yu-hyun picked it up to examine it more closely. While holding this device in his hands, he noticed, "Nameless bracelet, class unspecified, disposable." Looking at the bracelet that his older brother had handed him, bragging about what Yu Meng had done for him, Han Yu-heng said in surprise, "It nullifies all the damage received for 10 minutes. Seeing such characteristics on this strange bracelet, Han Yu-heng said in confusion, "Is this even possible?" Han Yu-jin happily replied, "This is why I told you to make a good impression on Yu Meng." Having demonstrated such an incredible lineage to his younger brother, Han Yu-jin put his hand on his shoulder and proudly said, "Yu-hyun, Kim Sung-han will become an S-class tank." After saying this, Han Yu-jin also added, looking at his brother and imagining the changes that would occur after Kim Sung-han reached S rank, "He will make your guild even more powerful." And yet, after much discussion and persuasion, everything was decided. Although Yu-hyun, hearing what was about to happen, objected, saying, "I didn't make it for this situation." Sung-han was in a similar situation, and he also objected, saying, "Taking Yu-jin to such a dangerous place." Even though not everyone agreed with this plan of action for Kim Sung-han's achievement of S-class, it took some time to persuade Yu-man and Kim Sung-han. But in the end, they appointed the latter to go to the dungeon. And so, the fateful day came, when it was time to upgrade Kim Seong-han to S. All the soldiers, climbing the gate to the A-class dungeon, were waiting for the mission to begin. Standing next to Han Yu-jin, fully dressed in his best equipment that raised his attack stats, Song-han said to Yu-jin, "Are you sure you'll be okay?" To which he replied, "Yeah, don't worry." Sitting on her spear, Park Aram spoke happily to the boys, saying, "That's right, we S-classes will be there for you." As she said this, she also added, drawing their attention to the car that had arrived. "By the way, here's someone else." Stepping out of the car that had just arrived at the dungeon gate where everyone was waiting, the head of the Destroyer Guild, Moon-hyun-ah, said to Yoo-jin, "Oh, Hyung-nim, how long have you been waiting?" And so, just to be on the safe side, and to ensure the successful execution of the plan, the team enlisted the help of a few more S-classes. Girl Yu had barely left the car when she quickly walked over to Yoo-jin. As she approached him, she greeted him with a happy greeting. "Hello to you, Mir. Will you be a good boy and let me ride you? Or is it a girl?" To which Yoo-jin replied, "Ah, you really do dream of having your own riding animal, don't you?" And so it seemed that such a number of high-class warriors and the total number of participants should have been enough, but Chairman Yuper's voice interrupted the joyful atmosphere and said, "Am I the last to arrive?" Opening the door from his personal car, which he had used to arrive at the gathering place for all the participants who were about to go to the dungeon, Guild Leader Jupiter said, "I am very curious to know." Shifting his feet one by one and leaving his chauffeur-driven car, Song Hyun-jae added, "What exactly are you up to this time, Han Yoo-jin?" Seeing such an unexpected guest who was also supposed to be present on this mission, Han Yoo-jin made a disgruntled face and thought, "What the hell is this guy doing here?" While Yoo-jin was thinking, everyone had already gone to the A-class dungeon to complete the task. This dungeon turned out to be a city of black golems. Looking at the area and the local scenery, there were many things to tell, but in short, and to the point, it was a terrifying dungeon with legions of golems and immortals everywhere. There were bones and skulls everywhere. Most likely all those who dared to come here without being sufficiently prepared and perished because of their overconfidence. The place where it happened. Standing at the edge of the dungeon, looking at the map and the terrain around him to get his bearings, Kim Seong-han spoke to the team. "The golems here are slow but strong. That's why our tactic is to split them up to win." Looking through his binoculars to cover more ground, Han Yoo-jin noticed an unusual scene, and hearing Kim Seong-han's words, he said in disappointment, "Tactics?" Noticing the explosions in front of him and the loud sounds of falls and blows, Han Yoo-jin continued to say his disappointed thing. "I don't think it's even possible." Standing on the edge of the cliff, Han Yoo-jin, Kim Sung-han, and Song Hyun-jae saw a brutal massacre organized by people they knew. As Park Aram, who was working with Moon-hyun-ah, easily destroyed the golems in the area, she exclaimed with joy, "Ah, these guys are too slow." Destroying the enemies one by one with a single blow without even using half of her full power, she exclaimed, "Tough, you say? They're actually like soft tofu." Watching the girls easily crush the golems, Kim Sung-han said in confusion, "It would take at least a week for an A-grade team to clear this dungeon. For the first time, I feel sorry for the monsters." Watching the incredible sight of the 3 S-classes clearing the A-class dungeon with ease, and in no time at all, Han Yoo-jin exclaimed excitedly, "Wow, I'm watching this with my own eyes." As Han Yoo-jin watched them all skillfully kill monsters one by one, leaving them no chance, he thought, a 4 S-class dungeon sweep. As Han Yoo-jin said this and watched Park Aram deal with the monsters with skill, he continued, "Even in the future, there hasn't been a single team that has multiple S-classes." Turning his gaze to Han Yoo-hyun, and now watching his younger brother fight monsters, Yoo-jin added, "I never would have thought that the day would come when I would see such a spectacle myself." As Han Yoo-jin watched each of the S-classes fight and do their best, he asked, "Wouldn't it be easier to send S-class groups to other dungeons?" Hearing Han Yoo-jin ask in such an enthusiastic voice, Kim Sung-han said in disappointment, "Oh, S-classes are not allowed to go to the dungeon together." Hearing this answer, Han Yoo-jin was very surprised. Hearing this answer from Kim Sung-han, Han Yoo-jin said in surprise, "Huh? Like a balance of power? In case a breakthrough occurs somewhere else?" Hearing this answer, Kim Sung-han replied, "That's also why, but..." Having said that, Kim Sung-han added, "When you see it, you will understand." Hearing these words from Kim Seong-han, Han Yoo-jin took the binoculars in his hands again and began to watch the battle. Looking at each fighter, he saw only one thing. He was looking at Park Aram, Domag Dealer. Looking at Moon Hyuna, Domag Dealer. And also looking at Han Yoo-hyun without change, Damage Dealer. Looking at everyone's fighting style, Han Yoo-jin finally realized what Kim Sung-han was telling him and said in his head, "Everyone is fighting alone? Didn't they even divide up the roles?" Hearing someone shouting from the battlefield, Han Yoo-jin saw that it was Park Aram. Standing in the midst of the monsters, she confidently called out, "Ta-da! Hey, I'll show you a couple of skins I got recently." Clutching her staff tighter in her hand, she used the levitate skill to fly into the air to more effectively use her next skill, Pale Rain. After using it, chunks of ice fell from the sky, freezing every golem they hit. But it didn't last long. Due to the team's lack of coordination, Han Yoo-hyun's flames thawed Park Aram's ice. When she noticed that her ice was thawing, she exclaimed in surprise, "What?" And then, seeing whose fault it was, she shouted in anger, "Hey, Chairman!" As Park Aram tried to escort Han Yu-hyun out of the area where she was fighting the monsters, she shouted in embarrassment, "Don't go there! The ice is melting!" And then she felt the flames reaching her in flight through Moon Hyun-ah's skill, and she immediately shouted out, "Hot! Hot! Hyun-ah, Ani, your wind is touching me!" To which she replied, "I didn't know you were there. Dodge it, you're an S-class." And after that, a disappointed voice was also heard from the battlefield. "Uh-oh, all the golems I froze have melted." As Han Yu-jin and Kim Sung-han watched, they all thought the same thing. No teamwork. Looking at their chaotic work, Han Yu-jin said to Kim Seong-han in embarrassment, "Is this because they are so good alone?" Hearing this, Kim Seong-han just laughed back at him. Hearing this fake laugh of frustration, Han Yu-jin suddenly turned his attention to another team member who was surprisingly doing nothing. Yu-jin thought, "Come to think of it, the most capable person here is this man." Looking at the S-class hunter standing right next to him, watching the battle, Han Yu-jin thought, "The head of the Jupiter Guild, Song Hyun-jae. Why is he here, but not doing anything?" Looking at the clothes he was wearing, Han Yu-jin was amazed. He dressed like this to go to the dungeon. All this is fashionable equipment, right? But for some reason it annoys me. He's the only one here with an SS-class weapon, and he's wearing a coat. Looking at the leader of the Jupiter Guild, Song Hyun-jae, Han Yu-jin saw that he was wearing the SS-class fire-resistant equipment, Wings of the Cilicia Flame Dragon. Recalling what happened in his past future, Han Yu-jin said in his head as he watched him, "In the future, his coat will cause my brother a lot of trouble." As Han Yu-jin continued to recall his past experiences, he continued his train of thought. If it wasn't for this fireproof coat, he would have been in trouble. If it wasn't for that fireproof gear in the tournament a few years ago, Yu-hyun would have won, not him. Piercing Song Hyun-jae with a disgruntled look, Yu-jin thought, "I wish I could rip off his coat and put it in the inventory." Standing next to Yu-jin, the Jupiter leader spoke to him. "I can feel your piercing gaze." Hearing Song Hyun say that, Han Yu-jin said in embarrassment as he rubbed his neck, "Ah ha ha. I'm just really happy that the head of the Jupiter Guild himself came to help. And he came all this way." Hearing Han Yu-jin say that, Song Hyun-jae replied, "Since you borrowed my guild's dungeon, I came to visit you." Hearing this, Yu-jin was confused. This was the only dungeon with perfect conditions. After thinking about it, Yu-jin replied to the Jupiter leader, "We are fine, so you can go." Hearing this sad answer, Song Hyun said, "How sad. I thought we were already at the stage where you trusted me. Considering that you are raising my—" Before he could finish, Han Yu-jin interrupted him, exclaiming, "Ah, stop it." Hearing such shouts from the mountain, Moon Hyun-ah said in a stern voice, "What are you doing up there, Song Hyun-jae? Did you come up here to be lazy?" After shouting such loud words at Song Hyun, she added, "Don't you want to work? You're so old. You've lost all your strength." Hearing such words addressed to Song Hyun, Yu-jin said in alarm, "Hyun-ah." Hearing such provocative shouts at him, Song Hyun-jae spoke in a calm voice, concentrating electricity in his hand. "Oh my, is it so difficult without my help?" Hearing Song Hyun-jae say that, Yu-jin could only be surprised and say, "Eh?" And the next moment, all of Sung Hyun's concentrated power flew toward where Moon Hyun-ah had just been standing. The lightning struck right at her location, blinding everyone around her. Seeing what had just happened, Han Yu-jin exclaimed in fright, "Moon Hyun-ah, no, it's her!" Hearing Han Yu-jin's alarmed words, Sung Hyun spoke to him. "I was just helping." Hearing this strange excuse for his actions, Han Yu-jin spoke angrily to him. "What kind of help is that? Are you holding a grudge against her or something?" To which he replied in a calm tone, "Not at all." Hearing that the head of the Jupiter Guild didn't hold any grudges against Moon Hyun-ah, Yu-jin said in confusion, "Then why did you do it?" Hearing Han Yu-jin ask this question, Sung Hyun just murmured in surprise. Seeing him pretending not to understand what he was talking about, Han Yu-jin spoke to him, pointing to the spot where his attack had hit. "How could you attack a co-worker instead of a monster?" Hearing Han Yu-jin say that, Sung Hyun looked at him with a sinister look and asked in the same tone, "A colleague?" Hearing this answer, Yu-jin was frightened. "Huh? What's wrong with him?" After this conversation, Moon Hyun-ah's angry voice came out of the pile of smoke and shouted loudly, "Hey, Song Hyun-jae, you son of a bitch!" She stepped out of the pile of smoke that had risen from Song Hyun's attack on the girl, holding her weapon and walking toward him, and shouted angrily, "Damn asshole!" Barely holding back her anger so that she wouldn't lash out at him and finish him off, she added, "If you're going to provoke me." With that, the girl rushed at him, swinging her weapon. After walking a few steps, she used the wind path skill to gain momentum. As she swung her weapon and prepared to attack, the girl who was flying toward Song Hyun shouted out, "To be honest, you should at least have equipment of the same class with you." Realizing that the girl was quite serious, Song Hyun moved behind Han Yu-jin and Kim Sung-han, planning to hide behind them. Seeing the Jupiter Guild leader do this, the boys screamed out in fright when they saw what he was doing. What? As she followed Song Hyun-jae, she saw that she was flying right at Han Yu-jin, who was standing with Mir and Kim Sung-hanok. Realizing what had just happened, she exclaimed in confusion, "Eh?" In an attempt to protect Han Yu-jin from this powerful attack that could definitely finish him off, Kim Sung-han used his shield skill, shouting out in fright, "No!" In an attempt to avoid the collision and minimize the damage, the girl pulled her spear back, shouting at Kim Sung-han, "This stupid shield won't work! Get out of the way!" Trying with all her might to stop her reckless attack based on emotion, the girl grabbed the spear to change its trajectory and shouted loudly, "I'll stop!" The next moment after these words, her attack hit a few tens of centimeters away from the boys. Thanks to Kim Sung-han's shield, the blast wave did not affect Yu-jin or Sung-han, and everyone remained unharmed. Even though the boys were unharmed, the girl's attack managed to break off a good chunk of the rock, and it flew down. Standing on the ruined rock, a piece of which she had broken off with her attack, the girl said in a frightened voice, breathing out a sigh of relief, "Phew. It's okay." Standing behind the terrified Han Yu-jin and Kim Sung-han, who had grabbed onto the boyfriend and the shocked Mir, Sung Hyun clapped his hands and said happily, "Incredible control." Hearing these words from the leader of the Jupiter Guild, the girl pointed her finger at him and exclaimed in frustration, "You idiot! It's your fault! If you had stayed where you were..." Seeing what had just happened, Han Yu-hyun, who had run to the rescue using his Blue Willow skill, spoke to the girl. "Be careful, Moon-hyun-ah." Suddenly appearing in front of Han Yu-jin, he said in confusion, "Yu-hyun." Hearing Han Yu-hyun's voice and seeing him in front of her, the girl said in surprise, "The head of the Abyssal."